The key elements that make FPS games fun, so the gunplay is very important, but on the other hand, we're going to add some other elements from Metroidvania games, for example, so some upgrades, ability to backtrack and access previously inaccessible areas. So yeah, it's a blend of everything we love in a game, not exactly a boomer shooter, rather something that feels both familiar and fresh at the same time.
I feel like this is way older than boomers. This is like the
grand boomers.
Couple generations earlier than them. Now the Metroidvania aspect, we were talking about this before we started recording, but you've got sort of a grappling hook. Is that his tail?
Yes, that's his tail actually.
Okay. Can we talk a bit sort of how the levels are structured? Is it kind of different little arenas, corridors, or open world, or how's it?
So it's a blend of all. So some levels will be rather linear, others will be more branching, and we're experimenting with different styles of level design because we want the game not to get repetitive during as you progress. Yeah.
And what sparked the initial idea for Mouse? Like, are you big fans of like 1930s cartoons? Where did the idea come from?
The idea was actually, it's quite funny because and Bioshock fan art drawn in rubber hose art style was found online many years ago by our art director, and he did like Bioshock. He does love rubber hose animation style. So he approached Mateusz a couple of years ago and said, hey, why don't we make a game out of this? And Mateusz loved the idea, so banded with just a couple of people. They started working on a prototype, and basically that's how Mouse was born.
The prototype went pretty viral. Like, people were immediately really attracted to this, and since that was released, you've clearly gone back and tweaked some stuff. Can you sort of point out some of the changes that have been made since that early footage showed up?
Yeah, I believe that the most crucial change is 3D environments. We put a lot of effort to meld the 2D animation with 3D environments. It's quite hard to do it. We believe that we achieved nice goal, and from there we are proceeding and working more about more levels.
Yeah, you may see that we have improved on the 2D animations, but the 3D is the biggest change so far, especially if you take a look, at our materials from a couple of months ago, because it took us a lot of experiments, given the fact that the game is entirely black and white. So we had to make sure that everything is clear to the player, that the players know what's interactable, what's not, and based on that, we decided what can stay in 3D, in 2D, what can be 3D, and we had to find the perfect blend of everything of that.
Are there any details, like in the animation, in the environments, that you're especially proud of?
Weapons reloadings, we really like them. We're really proud of them. There are a lot of them. Right now we showed only few weapons, but there will be much more in the final release.
Yeah, and I have to say that I quite like our enemy death animations because they're, over the top, really exaggerated. So I really love those.
Awesome.
Was there ever a version of this that was in color, or was it always black and white from day one?
It was always black and white from day one.
Always.
Can we talk about any other abilities in addition to, so we've got this grapple with the tail, and obviously a lot of guns. Will we be doing anything else? Any other skills, abilities?
So like I mentioned, some Metroidvania elements here and there, so you will be able, you will unlock some abilities as you progress. So the grappling hook for one thing, but the helicopter, that is also used by the protagonist as his tail over his head. Double jump, so some genre staples like that. We don't want to, spoil everything just now, but you can expect many different options to be unlocked as you go.
Cool.
I'm so into this game. I really love what you guys are doing here. Were there any specific, actual old cartoons that were huge influences on this? Did you kind of come across any hidden gems or anything like that?
Yeah, we have a stack of reference from the 1930s, 1940s. We watch all the shows by
a cop, and after that he turned to be a private investigator. And, it's a noir story, so Jack tends to usually find himself in a heap of trouble. But this time it's bigger than usual. It's a pretty sticky fondue of, celebrities, mobsters, dirty politicians, and a conspiracy aimed at taking over the US. So, it's going to be a big adventure.
Yeah, we also have a second character named Tammy. Tammy is not a playable character, but is really important for the story. She's a young mice orphaned as a child whose mother Jack knew. While she's not participate in investigation or gunfights, she makes Jack work much easier. As she's great with everything mechanical, she's upgrading weapons, inventing new gadgets, upgrading the old ones. She can it all.
She can do it all as long as you don't ask her to make some coffee.
Yeah.
Right?
But I don't want to add anything more because it's important to stay as it is.
Just from my perspective, I would like to add that this character is one of my favorites.
In the trailer, we hear about the shining side, like the shining zone, and there's some really beautiful imagery that comes up in just a second. It feels like you're trying to show something a little different, a little more about the world.
It's the idea that the zone, it's both a horrible and terrible place where a lot happening, like people dies and it's very risky to go there, but there is also a side that is also bring miracles and bring important things into your life, into these characters. So for many, it's the only place they want to stay and spend time.
Yeah.
So it's very important for them, and so it's about the zone. It's very different from different points of view. And for this character, the zone is different from the others.
Right, like just a second ago, we saw a meadow. That looked beautiful.
Yeah, it's the weird juxtaposition. But Eugene, I'm actually curious. So we did see that you did delay the game to November 20th. So what are you using that time for?
Yeah, so for now we're focusing mostly on optimizing the game and fixing the bugs. So we need to provide the most beautiful, the most stable, and the most amazing gaming experience that we ever made. So we are kind of focusing on that, and this is our main goal for now.
That's a lot of pressure, but I'm glad you're taking your time with it. We're all patiently waiting. It's okay.
How confident are you about the new release date, the November release date?
We actually pretty confident. So you may try our game on the.
So the players who start playing the game, they would get the experience. They are not get spoiled with some additional information. They get all these secrets discovered by their own. And the end of the story is one of the biggest secrets, and we don't want to give it now, sorry.
Sure.
Yeah, we will have like a lot of consequences of the player actions and the player decisions. So each player should experience the zone with his own decisions and with his own actions. Okay. So it will be like mostly unique for everyone.
So for you personally, in your mind, there's not one true ending?
I guess everyone should find their true ending.
Okay.
That's really sweet. I love that as the tagline, even though it's a very kind of scary game. But so speaking of the main story, obviously there's a ton of content that you've been touting with this new, you said the storyline will only take about 40 hours, I believe.
So overall, to finish the game, for some players like me, it will take 1 hour, 100.5 of hours, but for many players it will take much less time, but it's very different depending for the players, because you can take any big open world game and compare it to your friends, how much time do they spend, it would be so much varying. And we also expect to have a big replayability, because the story you get from the one walkthrough isn't in full. It's like 60% of the story, so you need at least 2 walkthrough to get 90% of the story, and you need 3 walkthrough to finish the story to get all this information. So it's really huge, and we are hoping the players would enjoy it and share their own story with each other. We have a lot of mechanics that are aiming for providing different experience for different players, so they could share their own little stories, which will be different.
This is a game with a lot of history, like a big fandom, but also with Stalker having come out some time ago, there's going to be a lot of brand new players. How difficult is it, like balancing the game for those new players and then the experienced fans who know everything about Stalker?
Thank you for this question. And each player should choose the game difficulty. So, for example, if you're not that experienced player with, especially with single-player shooter games, so you can just choose. We call it internally like story mode difficulty. It will be kind of challenging, but still, it provides you the focus on exactly on the storyline. So it will be challenging some way or another, but still you may just enjoy the story and there's a lot of amazing cutscenes and a lot of dialogues and a lot of characters. So
we know a lot of players who are loving our game for its atmosphere of abandoned place, and they will be interested in story, but they are not experienced players. They don't willing to die a lot, and this story mode would bring these players the experience they would love. And we are thinking that it's very important difficulty for bringing the game to totally different audience from the hardcore shooter players.
Sure, 100%.
Yeah, Yevgen, I think we do have, I was looking at the blog posts that were posted, and you did state that one of the core drivers of the player's progression and power is through exploration, and you want to reward players for their curiosity. What would you say really drove that in this game? Like, what is the best example of that?
I guess it happens everywhere. So you just go to big location, you have a lot of options where to go. So there is no like one point that are magneting you to it, and you discovering the new places and just looking nearby, you can find some unique gear, which is very powerful for this moment of your exploration, and you could easily miss this point and didn't get it here, or maybe find it much more in front of the game line. So it's a lot of examples for the player. They should just go for their interests where they find something interesting for them, and it could be rewardful or not.
Yep. Yeah. So risk reward.
Yeah. Yes, I love that. Thank you. Thank you.
Football. Every time before the ball is set in motion on the pitch, it's the culmination of hard work. To captivate the fans, to ensure everyone's safety, to meet every need, and to ignite the city's fiesta for the game. Sometimes it requires making tough decisions with lasting consequences. To elevate your football event to a global stage, to bring the best players and clubs to your city, to make your game happen in COPA City.
Very old man, and it's not very often you see old men in the starring roles of video games. Can you tell us a little bit about Goldman and why he deserves his own video game?
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. You know, usually you don't have these kind of protagonists. I feel it's kind of you feel like you're actually the protagonist of an ancient fable or like a parable, right? They often would have, old men essentially that would, outsmart their enemies, and it feel like it makes it pretty special. It also gives the opportunity to us to, have...
So my first impressions of the demo were that it was kind of like Up meets DuckTales with that cane, the old NES game DuckTales. But also there's this nightmarish, kind of sinister vibe going on in the background. Is Goldman going to end up being a horror game?
No, not at all. It's not going to be a horror game, but you're right. There is a bizarreness and weirdness to it, right? I mean, like the terrifying next to each other. So I think it's not going to be a horror game, but it's going to go places that are dark and deep, definitely.
And what kind of dark and deep inspirations did the team draw from for this game?
So I think it's more about, the darkness and the existential questions. And actually, if you have a close listen to the announcement trailer, and you hear the audio, what's being said in the trailer, that already gives you a hint what the game main horror themes are about. So I think it's really homing in on the fear within us that is kind of exemplified in these bizarre creatures. But it's not like one thing. It's really like what makes these myths and these ancient fears kind of go together.
Okay, well, I've heard the team on this game is very small. Have they used any AI or anything in the process of creating the look for the game?
There is no AI involved in that game, so everybody, it's really people sitting down on their desks for weeks, months, and actually can take up to a year for a biome to be finished. So it's really like hand-drawn. So you're gonna, first by hand on a piece of paper, sketch that, then use your tools to bring it into the game.
Survival, MMORPG. I've seen people be like, is it Conan Exiles in space? How do you pitch this?
Yeah, so it sort of starts off with this really strong survival angle. Like, I consider it like a V shape. You start in the focused survival part of the V, and then you move up and it becomes more of political survival, social, MMO, working with other players, working with large guilds. The initial premise of the game was just, hey, how do we...
That is a complex answer. Dune is like it's such complex lore to kind of put together. Where does this fall in the canon?
Yeah, so we worked with the Herbert estate, and we sort of went with like this alternate universe where instead of Paul being born, Jessica followed her orders from the Bene Gesserit, gave birth to a daughter, right? And then that shifts the landscape of everything. So we kind of did this for two reasons. One, it sets up the ability to have Harkonnen and Atreides on the planet fighting each other. It also means that people who've read the books and seen the movies have something to look forward to in our game, because there's something slightly different about it, right?
Okay, so it's
actual stuff going on, and I probably shouldn't spoil too much, but it's cool. If you take enough spice, things will happen.
Okay, and, interesting.
And then the Bene Gesserit themselves, like the Mentats, all of these kind of special things from the universe, you can learn them as archetypes. You can meet trainers in the world who will teach you a little bit of the ability. Like, you can't really become a Bene Gesserit, but you can learn some of their abilities. You can learn to use the voice, and then you can use that, say, in combat to compel an enemy to come charging at you, right? Or you can use it to make people not see you. You can tell them, like, ignore me.
Okay.
And they won't to Arrakis. Your character isn't really that used to spice. So after a little while, they start to have, a moment, right? Paul has one like that in the movie as well. The player starts to have a little moment, and it sets him on this journey through the world. And so spice is kind of, it's there as like a guide, a spiritual guide. It works as like something that fuels your growth, your abilities. It also works as like a currency for which you pay tax to the Emperor for building on Arrakis, right? And it also works to bribe people in the political system. So spice has a lot of uses.
There's a lot going on here.
Water. Starting off, you're kind of scrabbling to survive, so you're sucking moisture out of plants because you're not Fremen, you don't know how to live here in the desert, right? But then over time you learn to like pull the blood out of your enemies, extract it, take it to a machine, purify it, then you start taking water from there. Eventually you get like a dew reaper, which allows you to sort of walk around sucking the water off plants, like wilting them as you go. And then eventually, move up to the high levels of harvesting. Corpses to put in your death still to give you lots of water. So you are kind of moving through the progression. Tutorialize well, explain to people the world. There's a little single player section at the start of the game before you enter the main world. And in that single player section, we teach you the basic mechanics. We teach you a little bit about the lore. We give you a story. And then we put you into the world and sort of have you survive. I don't think the game is going to be for everybody. If you hate survival games, it's not going to be a game that you want to play, right? So I have to be clear about that. I don't like to sell games to people who don't want to play them. But at the end of the day, it's kind of, there's enough and learned it. But it is something that you can learn later in the game, hopefully, right? So you get further into the game, maybe you learn some skills about this, but not in the beginning, right? So some of our players in beta, they're like, oh, I'm walking like an idiot on the sand. I'm not using any rhythm. The sandworm still comes. And I'm like, comes out, So the idea is that when you're walking on the sand, you create vibrations every time you walk on the sand or drive or ride a vehicle or anything, right? The sandworm will
orders combat and knife fighting. How are you striking a balance between ranged and melee?
Yeah, so Dune has a really interesting shield mechanic, right? And it's part of the lore that shields basically rebuff all projectiles. So the way the game works, but there's things like the Shigawire Claw, which let you pull yourself into an enemy or force them to stumble. There's all sorts of stuff for moving around the battlefield. So it's kind of this combined arms, we call it, this combination of melee, ranged, and abilities. Conan Exiles, we had like freeform climbing. In Dune, we have a sort of more advanced version of that where you can climb on anything, but in addition, you can use abilities or suspensor belts. So once you get a suspensor belt, you can kind of just fly, right? You see it in the movies as well. You just sort of fly.
Follow my lead!
Shut up! You can't even run properly!
What the?
When the Rift is in trouble, the only ones you can rely on are... Dimensionals is the hottest new roguelike RPG. Put together incredible teams of unique heroes. Like Short, he's a bit of a dummy, but he loves blasting specters. Or the mysterious Shade Strike, the smooth-tongued gambler from the Shadow Dimension. Assemble your favorite heroes, strategize to make insane combos, but watch out, because Ragnarok's world-crushing bosses are no joke. Take on the Rift in style with the epic cartoon soundtrack by Brad Pitt. Experience wicked comic cutscenes in Dimensional's campaign mode, or blast your way through the open rift and face incredible and unpredictable challenges. Encounter a huge cast of characters like the Rogue Rifters, here to help you take down the bad guys. Or are they? Side effects of playing Dimensionals will include fun, addiction to victory, temporary loss of reality, and spontaneous combustion due to awesome. Some assembly required batteries not included.